Some stories don't begin with vows or promises. They begin with lights, with markets glowing in the dark, with mugs of mulled wine, steam rising against the cold. A ship gliding down the Rhine, its decks strung with garlands. Its nights alive with carols and quiet. Welcome to Men Being Too Intimate, an audio story series exploring what happens when two men blur the emotional lines, between energy and calm, between laughter and stillness, between the way one rushes in and the way the other lingers. Tonight's story takes us to a Christmas cruise along the Rhine, where an ESFP bold, radiant, always ready to celebrate, and an ISFP gentle, observant, quietly drawn to beauty. Find warmth not just in the season, but in each other. This is Men Being Too Intimate, the Christmas promise. The ship waited in Cologne, its gangway dressed with garlands and brass railings that caught the pale winter light. Bells from the cathedral drifted faint across the river, mingling with the shuffle of suitcases and the welcoming voices of staff offering mugs of steaming mulled wine. Jonas was already grinning at strangers, asking questions, pointing at the massive Christmas tree rising through the atrium windows. Mikkel followed quietly, his gaze softer, catching details Jonas missed. The way the wreaths framed each rail, the scent of pine carried faintly on the cold air. Their cabin was compact but warm, a wreath already hung neatly on the door. Jonas entered first, dropping his bag and pulling out his secret stash, magnetic holly stickers, red and gold paper garlands, and 2 flameless candles. "We can't let this room be plain," he announced, already sticking decorations to the door with exaggerated precision. Mikkel shook his head, amused, and slipped into a clean shirt, buttoning each button with quiet care. He was already half-dressed for dinner, though it was hours away. Jonas glanced over his shoulder, eyebrows rising. "You ready already?" Mikkel smoothed the fabric, meeting his eyes briefly in the mirror. "You'll take forever," he said, the faintest curve of a smile in his voice. Jonas laughed, looping the garland across the desk, the flicker of the fake candles glowing against the wood. Even here, in a cabin barely wider than their bed, it felt like there's Jonas scattering charm in every corner, Mikkel grounding it with calm. Dinner that evening was a celebration from the start. The dining hall glowed under chandeliers strung with holly, poinsettias bright on every table, and a pianist playing carols softly in the background. Jonas returned from the buffet with a plate piled high, 2 kinds of potatoes, glazed carrots, ham stacked precariously, while Mikkel's choices were fewer. Jonas leaned over, nudging him with a spoonful of gingerbread pudding until Mikkel gave in, shaking his head but tasting anyway. "You're impossible," Mikkel said quietly, but his smile lingered. Jonas leaned closer, lowering his voice as though it were just for them, though the room buzzed with voices. "It's already our 3rd Christmas trip together, you know that?" Mikkel's fork stilled for a moment. "Has it been 3? Stockholm, then Vienna, now this." Jonas's grin widened. "It's becoming our thing." Mikkel set his fork down, watching Jonas more than the lights around them. "It doesn't have to be a thing." Jonas tilted his head, playful but waiting. The atrium shimmered with garlands and glass as they walked back toward the deck later, the ship now gliding steadily down the Rhine. The night air was cold, their breath rising into the dark. Villages passed on the banks, windows glowing faint and warm. Jonas pulled Mikkel close, tucking him under his arm against the chill. They stood that way for a long while, the hum of the ship beneath their feet, the river stretching endless and calm. Mikkel whispered, almost to himself, 40 months and it still feels new. Jonas pressed his forehead lightly to Mikkel's temple. "Then let's keep making it new." The river moved on, lights trailing behind them, but neither man looked down. They stayed pressed together, Christmas warmth steady against December cold. Breakfast had ended, the clink of plates fading into the ship's steady hum as it moved down the Rhine. Back in their cabin, Mikkel sat by the small window with a mug of coffee warming his hands. Jonas sprawled across the bed with a steaming cup of cocoa, topped with a mountain of whipped cream from the buffet. Mikkel glanced over, brow arched. "Watch out. You're overdosing on sugar before noon." Jonas grinned, lifting the cup in mock salute. "That's the point of Christmas cruises, isn't it?" He took an exaggerated sip, cream catching at the corner of his lip. Mikkel shook his head, half a smile tugging at him as he reached for a napkin. "You'll crash before we even get off the ship." They sat together for a while, mugs warming their palms, the river sliding quietly past outside the glass. The cliffs and villages drifted by like painted scenery. Jonas reached for the day's program left on the desk, scanning it with bright eyes. Rüdesheim this afternoon, Christmas market, and a wine cellar tour. He looked up, already determined. We're doing the cellar. Mikkel raised an eyebrow, slow, unhurried. Are we? Jonas leaned closer, nudging his knee. Yes, and you'll like it. Mikkel set his coffee down, watching the gray sky and passing river more than the paper in Jonas's hand. I'll like it if you don't drink every sample they pour. Jonas laughed, tossing the folded program onto the desk. Deal. The lanes of Rüdesheim curled with lights and music, stalls glowing with sugared almonds, steaming sausages, and mugs of glow wine that left the air heavy with spice. Jonas darted from one to the next, unstoppable. He reached for another tray of free samples, little wedges of Christmas stolen, dusted with sugar, when Mikkel caught his wrist. Enough, you've already had 3. Jonas flashed a grin. That's because the first 2 weren't conclusive. I needed a proper taste test. Mikkel rolled his eyes, tugging him along. Jonas was already halfway to the next stall when Mikkel sighed, muttered something about needing the restroom. Jonas ducked toward the restroom, tossing over his shoulder, Don't run away. I'll be quick. Mikkel stayed, weaving through a row of ornament stalls. His fingers brushed a series of glass baubles, delicate spheres in frosted silver, pale blue painted with snowflakes. He lingered on one in particular, deep cobalt with a swirl of white across its curve, imagining it against the blue and white tree waiting back home. Still, he hesitated. He always took his time, weighing every choice until it felt right. When Jonas returned, he was carrying far too much. Roasted chestnuts spilling from a cone, 2 steaming mugs of glow wine in boot-shaped souvenir cups, and, tucked under his arm, a small bag with something folded inside. His grin was unstoppable. I told you not to overdo it, Mikkel said, glancing at the chestnuts. Jonas offered one anyway, shrugging. You weren't here to stop me. Then he lifted the mugs proudly. Free souvenirs. 1 for you, 1 for me. Tell me I'm not brilliant. Mikkel shook his head, eyeing the overstuffed bag. What did you buy now? Jonas pulled it open just enough to reveal a flash of red fabric trimmed with white fur. A pair of Santa-themed underwear, ridiculous and festive. For the room, he said, eyes gleaming with mischief. Mikkel's brows arched high. You're impossible. Admit it, it'll look good, Jonas teased, then nudged the ornament stall where Mikkel had been standing. And you don't think I didn't notice? You've been circling that blue one for 10 minutes. Pick it. I'm paying. Mikkel hesitated, his hand brushing the glass again. The bauble's deep blue caught the golden light of the market. Jonas leaned close, warm from wine and laughter. Come on. I'll buy silly things. You buy the beautiful one. That's the deal. That's us. Mikkel finally nodded, handing the ornament carefully to the vendor. When the box was passed to him, he held it as if it already belonged to their tree. Jonas slipped the ridiculous underwear bag deeper into his coat pocket, grinning to himself. Both had what they wanted. Both, in their own way, carried Christmas home. The cellar was low and cool, lit with flickering candles along stone walls lined with heavy barrels. A guide poured mugs of steaming mulled wine, the scent of cinnamon and clove thick in the air. Jonas raised his first mug with enthusiasm, clinking loudly against Mikkel's. To 40 months, he said, eyes bright, voice carrying across the table. And to every December we'll still have. Mikkel lifted his mug quieter. To us. The wine was warm, sweet, and strong. Jonas finished his quickly, laughing at the way it steamed against the cold. When the guide returned with a refill, Jonas accepted without hesitation, then a third not long after. His cheeks flushed, his laughter louder, but he stayed steady, playful, never sloppy. He leaned close, nudging Mikkel with his shoulder. We should get a bottle, he whispered. Mikkel's hand caught his wrist, gentle but firm. No more tonight. Jonas paused, then grinned, lifting both palms in mock surrender. Fine. You win. Back in their cabin, Jonas had barely kicked off his shoes before collapsing across the bed, sleep pulling him down with the same speed he'd lived the day. His scarf and coat ended up on the chair, the little bag with the Santa shorts tossed careless to the floor. Mikkel moved quietly, setting Jonas's things aside, tucking the bag under the desk with a shake of his head. Then he reached for the small box that held the blue ornament. For a moment he turned it in his hand, the glass catching the dim cabin light. Then, carefully, he unbuttoned the shirt he'd worn earlier, folded it soft around the ornament, and tucked it deep between his clothes and the suitcase. He glanced back once more. Jonas was already asleep, his breathing deep, his arm flung carelessly across the bed. Mikkel stood by the small window with his empty mug, watching the Rhine slip past in the dark. The day's noise had fallen away, leaving only the hush of the river and the weight of something fragile, protected, and kept for later. Day 3 began bright but heavy with clouds, the kind that promised rain by nightfall. Jonas woke with the same rush of energy he'd carried since Cologne, pulling on his sweater while humming carols under his breath. If anything, 2 full days had only wound him tighter. Mikkel, slower, zipped his bag after a careful check. Scarves, gloves, even 2 umbrellas packed neatly at the bottom. He didn't complain, but the weight of Jonas's thrill was beginning to show in the quiet around his eyes. Cobblins rose before them, a sprawl of more than 100 stalls, music and light bleeding into the cold square. Jonas was gone the moment they entered, darting toward a stall selling steaming mugs of glowwine. He returned a few minutes later, triumphant, holding another souvenir cup, this one deep green, painted with the year and the Cobblin skyline. "Look," he said, eyes shining, "another one for the collection. We'll line them all up when we get home." Mikkel took the bag of trinkets from his arm, setting the cup carefully inside. Later, he dragged Mikkel toward a nutcracker stall, insisting on photos with a felt elf hat tilted ridiculous on his head. He bought Lebkuchen hearts with sugar-script letters, a cone of sugared almonds, and kept tugging Mikkel along as if the square might dissolve if they didn't see it all at once. Mikkel carried the weight quietly, his patience stretched thin but not broken. Jonas was still buzzing when they passed one last stall, its table crowded with hand-carved wooden angels painted gold. "Wait, just one more," he said, already reaching for his wallet. He patted his pocket, then the other. Mikkel, steady, already had a guess. He shifted through the bags Jonas had piled on him, careful fingers parting paper and trinkets until he pulled out the missing wallet from the same bag that held the new souvenir cup. He held it up with a pointed look. "Be careful," Mikkel said simply. Jonas's relief turned into a sheepish laugh. He leaned in, brushing a quick kiss against Mikkel's cheek. "See? This is why I need you." Mikkel shook his head, but didn't argue. The market still buzzed behind them, lights glowing in the deepening gray. Their cabin was dim and warm, the river sliding dark outside the window. Souvenir bags were piled on the bed, paper crinkling under the weight of mugs and sweets. Mikkel sat down slowly, his voice quiet but certain. "Can we have tonight here?" Jonas paused, caught off guard. Then he reached into the desk drawer, tugging free the red Santa briefs with a grin. "Oh, you want this?" Mikkel didn't move. His gaze stayed steady. "I'm not joking, Jonas." The grin softened, then faded. Jonas slipped the briefs back into the drawer and crossed the room, lowering himself to his knees. His hands pressed warm against Mikkel's thighs. "Hey," he said, voice gentler now. "I hear you." For a moment they stayed like that, eyes level, Jonas leaning close. Mikkel's shoulders eased, his breath steadying. Then Jonas rose, crossing to the counter where the small kettle waited. "You want tea?" he asked quietly. Mikkel blinked at him, surprised. Jonas shrugged, opening the packets the ship had left, pouring water into 2 mugs. He placed the steaming mug into Mikkel's hands, brushing his fingers. Mikkel cradled the mug, watching him. Jonas leaned against the counter, no grin, no rush, just the faintest smile, almost shy. "You think I only like the noise," Jonas added after a pause. "But I like this too." The words settled heavier than the trinkets in their bags, warmer than the tea in their hands. For the first time in 3 days, Mikkel felt Jonas's glow pointed inward. Not at the markets, not at the crowds, but at him. Mikkel stretched out on the bed after tea, letting his eyes close just for a moment. Jonas pressed his forehead against Mikkel's, eyes closing as his hand rose to trace the line of Mikkel's jaw, then lower to his shoulder, his chest. It was slower than usual, less spark, more weight. Every touch lingering, testing, learning again. Mikkel turned into him, their mouths meeting unhurriedly. A kiss that deepened not in urgency but in patience, as though time itself had slowed to the pace of the river outside. Jonas's laughter, the noise of the markets, the sugar and wine, all of it fell away. What remained was warmth, steady and certain. The quiet press of lips, the gentle curl of fingers at the nape of a neck. They undressed each other slowly, not in hunger but in reverence, letting each layer fall without rush. The ship's hum was the only sound beneath their breathing. Jonas cupped Mikkel's face, holding it steady as though to memorize it, and Mikkel guided him closer with a strength that was never loud but always sure. The night stretched long, filled with touches that lingered, with whispered names, with kisses that carried no urgency at all. It was not escape, not release, but return. 40 months of love finding its rhythm again, made new in gentleness. And when at last they lay still, Jonas's head tucked beneath Mikkel's chin, their hands entwined across the space between them, it felt as though nothing outside that cabin could matter. Only the river, only the glow in their chest, only the warmth of being chosen, again and again. For the first time all trip, the morning passed without hurry. The ship was hushed, most passengers already ashore, leaving the hallways still. Mikkel lay back against the pillows, eyes half closed. A soft knock came, followed by a tray set carefully inside. Jonas had ordered room delivery. He carried it with a flourish, balancing mugs and plates. "Breakfast a la cabin," he announced. "Coffee for you and for me? Fresh orange juice?" "Look at me, being healthy." Mikkel sat up slowly, reaching for the coffee. Jonas perched at the end of the bed, tearing into a croissant with his hands. "See? I can stay put." Mikkel shook his head but smiled, the warmth of the mug settling in his hands. They ate together in the calm, bread still warm, jam bright and sweet, the sound of water lapping faintly outside their window. When the plates were cleared away, Mikkel shifted, his voice low but certain. "We should visit the cathedral market this afternoon." He paused, glancing at Jonas. "And we need one more cup to finish the set." Jonas lit up instantly, all the calm giving way to sparkle. "The last one. Then the collection's complete." He leaned in, brushing a kiss to Mikkel's temple. "You're the best." Mikkel sipped his coffee again, letting him glow, letting the quiet stretch just a little longer before the world began again. By late afternoon, the cathedral square glowed with golden lights and garlands. They moved slowly through the market, Jonas triumphant with the final mug, Mikkel careful as he chose a single glass ornament in icy blue. Choirs sang, bells echoed above, and together they carried their treasures back through the winter evening. The ship's dining hall shimmered that night, chandeliers spilling light across tables dressed in red and gold. Every passenger was in their best, the air humming with soft music and clinking glasses. Just before they entered, Jonas pulled 2 small Christmas pins from his pocket. He fastened one onto Mikkel's lapel with a grin. "Picked these up in Rüdesheim, thought we'd match tonight." Mikkel blinked, touched, then smiled in that quiet way of his. "You kept that secret well." Jonas's hand brushed Mikkel's. Then again, a rhythm that didn't need words. They laughed softly, savoring courses that felt more like ceremony than meal. Later on their way back to their cabin, Jonas stopped Mikkel beneath a sprig of mistletoe tied to the doorway arch. He tilted his head, eyes mischievous. Rules are rules. The kiss was deep and certain, no crowd this time, only the hush of the hallway and the warm glow of Christmas lights. When they parted, Jonas pressed his forehead to Mikkel's, whispering, "Merry Christmas." Mikkel smirked, voice low. "It's not even Christmas yet." Jonas's laugh was quiet but sure. "Don't spoil the moment." And he kissed him again, softer this time, until neither cared what the calendar said. The ship eased back toward the dock under a pale December sky, the last morning quiet with the weight of farewells. Mikkel zipped the final carry-on bag shut, checking twice that the fragile ornament was wrapped in layers of folded clothes. Jonas, meanwhile, was fussing with their stack of mugs, trying to wedge the last one safely between sweaters. Mikkel glanced at him, then at the tree pins still on Jonas's lapel from the night before. "We should continue," he said softly. "Next year, Prague? But no cruise. I'd rather stay in one city." Jonas straightened, mock offended. "That's my planning you're stealing, you just follow." He grinned, then nodded. "But Prague, okay, one city." His eyes dropped to the cups in his hands. "Guess just one set next time." Mikkel smiled back. "I'll follow your plan." Jonas leaned close, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek before hefting the bag. Stockholm was deep in winter by the time they returned, their apartment warmed by the soft glow of lamps and the hum of the heater. Outside, the city was hushed beneath snow, but inside, the season came alive in the corner of their living room. The tree shimmered in blue and white, glass ornaments glowing like frost. Mikkel stood before the tree, careful as ever, lifting the 2 ornaments he had chosen on their trip. The first, a frosted globe in pale icy blue from Cologne. The second, deeper, richer, cobalt glass from Rüdesheim. He placed them side by side, their colors glowing against the white lights, adding to the blues and silvers already collected from past years. 40 months together, 3 Christmases already marked, every December adding another piece to the story. Behind him, Jonas was at the table, arranging mugs. 6 new ones from the cruise lined beside the dozens already collected. He stepped back and laughed. "We've got enough for a cafe now, these cups keep piling up." Mikkel turned, watching him with quiet affection. "And yet every December you still want another." Jonas came over, slipping his arm around Mikkel's waist, gazing with him at the glowing tree. "Because every December's different, every trip's different, every us is different." They stood together, cups gleaming on the table, the tree radiant in blue and white, the weight of their tradition settling gently around them. They knew that love was not in the things they carried home, but in the promise that every December they would choose each other again. Christmas ended not with noise, but with a tree lit in blue and white with cups stacked high, and 2 men certain of the love that filled their home. ESFP and ISFP, one who chases light, the other who steadies the glow. Together, they found a rhythm not in rushing, but in choosing each other, again and again. This was the Christmas promise, a story of joy overflowing into care, and of steadiness turning into shared tradition. That's what happens when men are too intimate. When December becomes not just a holiday but a promise, this was Jonas and Mikkel. A story of playful cups and careful ornaments, and of love that glowed blue and white, lasting long after the river faded. Men Being Too Intimate will continue next year with new 8 pairings. Subscribe and like and follow for gay audiobooks. Have a wonderful holiday.